What is up, you guys? So I wanted to show you my new marker board. Ta-da! And we got markers, and Andrew loves using marker boards because, especially like with anything that he does business related, he's always working on a business, on a startup. And especially when he's working with a team, he really likes to have a marker board. Like, we actually got 2 of these, and it was really cheap at like the local market at Bintang, if anybody knows Bintang in Bali, in Ubud. So yeah, they had these markers. Like, I didn't think they would have them because it's just really hard to find things in the market here, so I was really surprised. But it feels cool to have this, and I've watched several other YouTubers that when they talk, they just always have a marker board around in case they want to like put an idea on paper and show it to you. I like it. It makes me feel so official, and I'm still so self-conscious, but we're gonna change that. So I wanted to talk a little bit about the Jewish stuff because, as many of you know, I grew up Jewish, and my family is from a long line of Iranian Jews that lived particularly in the city of Shiraz, but like maybe a little bit on the outskirts. And they have these like records of, people were really serious about their genealogy, about being Iranian Jews, because they were just so insulated among, it wasn't like in the States where being Jewish is so big and loud and proud, and everybody is sort of like, having their big synagogues in public and walking around outside and being all Jewish. In my parents' culture, Jews were very small. They were a very tiny minority. They really laid low, and the way that they do everything was very undercover. It was not like, it was very like in your basement kind of thing everybody had. And even I have my name, everybody's name is, it can either be in the name that matches the culture at large, and then they have the name that they use at home, which is their Jewish name or like their Hebrew name. So for example, my name Pardes is Farsi. It's a very popular Iranian name, and in fact other Iranians, when they meet me and I say that my name is Pardes, they look at me and they say Pardes, because I look Iranian and they know that Pardes is an Iranian name. But Pardes is also a Hebrew name. Pardes, like an orchard, and it also has like it also has an esoteric Jewish meaning. So like a lot of Iranian families operated this way: Iranian Jewish, and Iranian Baha'i, and Iranian Christian, and Iranian, Sunni Muslim, like people that didn't match with the ruling class, that were like a religious minority. They had their identity that they presented to the public, and then they had their identity that they had at home, because they don't want to get on the radar of people that might potentially hate them or might potentially come after their children, like self-preservation. So this is the Iranian Jewish culture, and that's how a lot of the customs that you see between Iranian Jews versus Jews of maybe more Western countries might be a little bit different. For example, like Iranian Jews are less likely to wear a kippah outside, or they're less likely to wear tzitzit. They're strings of, I don't know how to explain in English, outside, like a religious garment. They're like less likely to wear that in public because they don't want to be targeted. And the Western Jews are more loud and proud about it. And there's like debate between this. So, but it's not right or wrong. It's just what people adapted for their environment. My neck hurts so bad. So last night I had a dream, and the dream was that there was a big, huge bear, and but it actually, when I woke up, like I realized in the dream I thought it was a bear, So I was being chased by a bear, but it wasn't just me. I was part of this group of people. It was like friends, family. Andrew was there. Like our friends were there. They weren't even Jewish at all. It was just people, just my friends and family. My friends from Dallas, this couple that we know that we are really fond of, and we've spent some time with them in Colombia, and we've in my dream there was two of them, so there was like this couple was there twice, like there was two sets of the same couple, and which is really weird in my dream. But like it was basically like my little tribe, like all the people that I know were there, and we were all together being chased by a giant King Kong. It looked like King Kong, and in my dream it was a bear, but like when I woke up I realized like no, it was much bigger. It was like the size of a 3-story building. It was coming in chasing us, and in my dream we were all huddled together because it was instinctive, because that's how we knew to feel safe. And instead of running away in all different directions and trying to escape from the King Kong, which looking back when I wake up, that makes sense to do that, to all run away, because the King Kong can't be in all different directions. But instead we all clustered together. We held on to each other like this, like a ball. We all just held on to each other, so scared. And the King Kong looked at us and he said, "Do you want me to eat all of you?" And we said, "No, we're clustered together because we don't want you to hurt us. We are scared that we're scared of you, so that's why we're clustered together." And the King Kong was laughing, and he said, "So you think that by all of you clustering together, that's how you're going to be safe? You're making it very easy for me to eat all of you at the same time." And he started reaching out, and we were all so scared, and we were like, oh my gosh, like, what are we doing? And in my dream, and then I woke up, it was like kind of a nightmare. I mean, the whole dream wasn't a nightmare, but that part of it was the end of it, the finale where the King Kong came to eat all of us together. And I woke up from the dream and I was like, oh my God. And I wasn't even thinking about the Jewish stuff. But I woke up, and I always tell my dreams to Andrew when I wake up. Andrew, who's not Jewish, but who has observed a lot of my psyche over the past few years and thoughts about this. And he said that, wow, this is so interesting. It sounds like your mind is trying to communicate something to you. And it's like almost like a philosophical dilemma, that your mind is scared of something, or it's like trying to resolve this conflict. Do I stick with the group and feel safe in my group but then get eaten with the group, or do I run off? And this is what I was trying to decide in my dream too. Do I run off in my own way, and if I get eaten myself, then I get eaten myself, but if not, then I don't have to go down with the ship, basically. I don't have to go down with the group. And if I get eaten myself, then at least just one of me is being eaten and not everybody together. So this was my dilemma in my dream. And then when I think about it, why did I have this dream? This past week is really interesting because I don't normally think about Jewish stuff. For anybody that knows my story, and I've talked about this so much on the internet, I left the Jewish community when I was 24, so that was like 7 years ago. I left the Jewish community. And when I say left, I mean, I didn't go to modern Orthodox. I didn't go to Reform. I didn't go to conservative. I went to no Jewish. In fact, I avoided going to synagogues. I avoided dating or talking to people too much that were Jewish. And now I'm kind of back to, I'm actually closer with my family and friends from the Jewish community than I was before, but I'm close with, I'm not, my personal circle is kind of a mix. It's not only Jewish. And I think when people would ask me over the years, like, why did you stop being religious? Why couldn't you just, and I would describe that I didn't like being religious. It was restrictive, all these things. But then they would say, so why don't you just stay within the non-religious Jewish community? Why don't you do that? And I never really had a good answer for that. I never could understand. One answer that I would say is that I wasn't physically attracted to Jewish men, which was true. It was really hard for me to picture myself wanting to do anything physical with a Jewish man. Just felt too like trying to be physical with your brother, like it felt very incestuous. And even a Western Jewish man, like the thought of being physical with somebody that grew up in that community was disgusting to me. And because I lived in the States, and like I'm very attracted to Andrew, for example, not to put him in the spotlight, but like very easily attracted to him. Right when I met him, I was attracted to him. So it was just in my body. I couldn't explain it, and I also didn't feel safe being around Jews. Even maybe especially because of my Jewish heritage, background, whatever, I just didn't feel safe. And I think part of that is that like the Jewish community at large, like Jews have survived thousands of years living kind of the way that like my ancestors did. And I think that when we became religious when I was really little, I mean, we were all, the Jews in Iran were already religious, traditional, people call it traditional, where they like adhered to certain rules, but they weren't as hardcore as like Western Orthodox Jews. So when I was little, my family sort of became religious in the Western way, which was very hardcore for me, and it almost felt like kind of not the way that it just didn't feel. It felt almost like an imposter sort of thing, like an imposter belief system, because it was like the way that we were, but it was much more extreme. It just didn't make me feel safe. I didn't feel safe to be around Jews. I didn't feel safe to be around Jews in public. I didn't feel safe to be in large groups of Jews. The way that they acted, it's like, let's say you spent your whole life being scared of the bear, and you learned your whole life, or like in your DNA it's like this, and your parents are like this, and you learned your whole life that this is how we lay low from the bear. And then all of a sudden you're in a group of people that they don't do those things. They don't lay low from the bear. Their whole way of being is to try to intimidate the bear. They're more loud and proud, and you're so scared because you're like, this is not the way that I am. I'm not like this. I can't. The bear is going to sense my fear and is going to come and chase after me if I am in this group of people. Maybe they can handle being loud and proud and scaring the bear, but I can't, and I don't feel safe. And so I think that's how I felt, where I felt like it's okay for Western Jews to be so loud and proud about their Judaism, and to be so extreme, and to be so like ideological, but I didn't feel safe being in that environment. I didn't feel like it was very conducive to my survival. And the thing is, like, Judaism is very much a survival oriented religion, because it's not just a religion, it's like a tribe. It's like you're part of a tribe. It's a way of being, and a lot of people copy. It's not even copying Jews, but a lot of people have this way, and it works. Like, it's just a survival way. It's like you're part of a family. You're very selective about where you live, whom you interact with, whom you allow into your tribe. Basically, like, you see this in a lot of different religious groups: Mormons, Baha'is, like Amish people, like, I don't know, like a lot of people in the world are like this, where they operate as a tribe. They have their belief system. They're very intentional about the way they do things. And they tend to be very wealthy, usually, compared to like the people around them. And yeah, I'm just losing my train of thought here. But so a few days ago, I was working on my laptop, and I was fixing up the House Hackers Anonymous website. And there was this girl sitting next to me from Taiwan. And she, we were talking, we just got to chatting a little bit, and she's like, oh, what are you working on? And I said, I'm working on my website. I told her about House Hackers Anonymous. I didn't tell her about my background or anything. In fact, like I mentioned, I have not been affiliated with like a shul or a synagogue or anything like that in years, and I really avoid stuff like that. I even, it's really weird, but I even feel unsafe sometimes to visit my family. I just feel really weird. I don't feel comfortable to stick myself to the Jewish community. So, and just to even become, so anyways, so, and like I eat non-kosher, I don't do Shabbat, like, you know, I kind of implement the ideas of like survival in my personal life a lot, but I just do it based on what my body feels like doing, not based on what the religion is like. So I don't know if I'm making sense. Like, I'm very selective about what I eat. I take a lot of breaks, you know, I'm very ritualistic. Well, Andrew and I always have like routines that we do. And more as time goes on, we start to like have our little routines, you know, but I don't like to do Jewish stuff. And so anyways, like if you're having a conversation with me, being Jewish is not something that would pop up at all. If I meet you somewhere, there is no sign for you to know that I'm Jewish in person, at least. And so we're talking, and I tell her about House Hackers Anonymous, and I'm describing House Hackers Anonymous as this survival program that I made for my younger self. It's a book, it's a course, and like the whole thing, and like I'm fixing up my website, I'm trying to decide, and her thing was branding, so she was kind of giving me ideas, and I was telling her about it, and it's basically all about survival. Like, what would happen if you lost your job? What would happen if whoever was paying your bills stopped, died, left, whatever? What would happen if like a catastrophe happened in your town, wiping out your local economy? What would happen if what would happen if your currency suddenly became valueless? Like, all these things, all these anxieties that like I've just had my whole life, and I basically just put it all into a book, like my personal little strategy, like how I would deal with all these things, or how I have dealt with things in my past. And as I was describing it to her, she's like, "Are you Jewish?" And I was like, "What? How did you figure that out?" And she said, "I don't know, just a feeling, just a guess." She was just a guess. And I was really impressed that just based on this intense survival feeling that I was describing to her, that I wrote about in my book, that had nothing to do with my family or anything like that, she was able to guess that I'm Jewish. And I was just thinking about that a lot. I've been thinking about that a lot. She's a very sharp girl, and she's very well traveled. And I was like, "Did you spend time in a Jewish community or something?" Like, she was able to tell. And what I realized, what I was thinking about, is like, this is a thing. Being Jewish, it does run blood deep. It does run, you know, if you take, your mind works differently if you are not just a nomadic person within your own lifetime, but if you are genetically coming from a group of people that have been nomadic over thousands of years. Nomadic meaning they are not, but Judaism is not purely a nomadic religion either. It's like the whole philosophy of the religion is like, you are always prepared to be on the run. So it doesn't mean you're always on the run, but you're always prepared. And the failure as a Jew basically is, and you can say that so many reasons, like you're waiting for the Messiah, you're waiting for this or that, Mashiach, whatever the reason is that people give, but like, you're kind of always bracing for the next genocide, because this is just part of being Jewish, that you are raised like this. You're always ready for the next genocide, so you're always just prepared. That's what it's all about. And imagine taking a group of people that this is how they think. they're very survival oriented, to the point where I was having a conversation with this girl, and she was able to tell that I'm Jewish right away. And then when she saw my reaction, that I was shocked that she was able to tell, she was embarrassed. She was like, "Oh, don't worry. Like, I didn't." I was like, "Why would I? You know, like, I'm amazed. I'm really amazed that you can tell this." And it made me think to myself, like, no matter, you know, and they always say this to try to make you not leave the Jewish community, where they say, no matter where you go, people will know, they'll find you, they'll know that you're Jewish, they're going to kill you. You know, and they try to instill this fear in you. And for me, the fear was way too much, to the point where I just don't want to be part of it. I don't want to be living in dire fear my whole life. I want to find peace, which I really did not find in the Jewish community, because you know, especially in the Western Jewish education system, you are raised being taught about the Holocaust, watching about all the different genocides. They show you movies of people, you know, like all these bad things. And not to mention my family history. My family escaped from Iran, and like I was talking to one of my relatives, and she was talking about, like, we were talking about people from Mashhad, which is another city in Iran. Like, in the past, like, Mashhad is a very religious city in Iran. So, like, you know, Iranian Jews oftentimes, or at least when I was growing up, tend to be a little bit incestuous, a little bit inbred, to the point where, like, they're so scared of, like, other people from other cities, because what if this person's pretending to be Jewish, but they're not really Jewish? It's like in dating, like, people would be so scared of people from other cities that were, like, saying that they're Jewish. Go, what if we don't know them? They're not really Jewish, or they're kind of like an imposter. They're infiltrating us. They don't have the same customs as us. Like, there's just always, like, this fear of the outsider. Even between the different towns in Iran where, like, there were Jews, the Jews in each town would be afraid to intermix with the Jews from the other towns, because, like, what if they're trying to kill us? And there's this town called Mashhad where that was, like, really serious, where, like, a lot of people were killed or persecuted, or like people were hyper scared of showing the people around them that they're Jewish, that they're not, like, a very religious Shia Muslim. And so a lot of them, you know, they have Muslim names, they have their style, and they're even just, it's just very interesting. So I've just been thinking about this stuff this week, and then you know, remembering just so many memories coming up of this stuff. And I realized that I don't feel safe being part of, like, a Jewish community right now, because I just don't feel like I just, so the title of this video is, this is where I would go if there was, like, another Holocaust. And people always talk about this, like, another Shoah, another Holocaust. And I think my dream was telling me that I don't feel safe to be part of a Jewish community, because it's so, there is a wisdom to being exclusive, and there's a wisdom to being exclusive and limited and protecting yourself from your surroundings, as a Jewish community. But if you look at, like, Jewish history, the biggest kings didn't come from inbred Jews. The biggest kings in Jewish history, a lot of them came from kings, leaders, even rabbinic scholars, came from intermixed families. And even in your own body, when you think about it, a part of being surviving in the world and laying low and not being genocided is learning how to be part of your environment. And when I feel like a community is like way too inbred, and not even just a Jewish community, like any community is like too inbred, meaning they're just too isolated and cut off from the rest of the world, it makes me really nervous. And they'll say, well, you don't want people to be assimilated, and they're gonna just be part of the rest of the world. And but yeah, so there's always going to be this discussion. But I think I get nervous, like, especially when a lot of people are going to hate Jews. A lot of people are going to hate all kinds of people, first of all. Like, if you're Mormon, I saw a recent study that said that it was showing which religious groups in the States were the most hated. And I was expecting Jews or Muslims to be at the top of the most hated religions. And it was actually Mormons. Mormons are the most hated religions. At least in like, I think it was a study of like the Midwest or something. So it was just like really weird and surprising to me to see that. But anytime you're a group of people and you kind of identify with several other people, and you're all kind of going to be like a little bit better, well-to-do than the rest of the people in that area, you're going to be hated. The people in that area, especially if you're doing better than they're doing, financially, health-wise, you're reproducing, like all these things, you're going to be hated. People are going to hate you because the nature of being a poor person who's struggling, especially people who have a struggling nervous system, is that they need to survive, and they need to think how they need to think in order to survive. When I was struggling, when I was poor, and I still do, when I'm feeling not strong, I latch onto my environment and I can't help it. I have to accept that this is what the body does to survive. It latches onto the environment around it, and it's going to put blame on the environment around it. If you're a person around me and I'm struggling and my nervous system is not very regulated, I don't have any tools to regulate my nervous system better than like grabbing onto my environment. That's the nature of being a person that is struggling. So if you're gonna live in a place where people are struggling and they have a struggling nervous system, you have to understand that this is what you kind of have to prepare for. Like, you're in a place where people's nervous systems are not stable. It doesn't matter if it's your fault or not. This is what their body has to do to survive. This is what my body has to do to survive when my nervous system is shaking and crazy. If there's other people in my environment, I have to hold on to them for survival. Whether it is just to throw my feelings at them and let them absorb my negative feelings, whether it is to put my blame on them to make them feel at fault, feel responsible for the things that are happening in my life. It doesn't matter if it's my fault or not. I have to do it because it's my job to protect myself, and I'm struggling. And this is what people have to do. This is what happens when people are struggling and nervous. And eventually I'm learning how to like regulate my own nervous system. I'm learning tools. I'm actually learning a lot of things from people that are already good at it. I learn a lot from Andrew. I learn a lot from the people in my environment. We're in Bali. Like, there's so many people that have been learning how to regulate their nervous system for many years. So eventually, people might learn. But like, chances are, if you're in a place where everybody's nervous systems are unregulated, everybody's teaching each other bad habits, everybody is cementing each other into like a worse and worse situation, you're probably not going to have the tools to learn. And this is what you're going to do. You're going to have to project your problems, your issues on other people around you, because that is all you have to survive in that moment. And it's really important to understand this if you're the kind of person that is doing better in any way than the people in your environment. And it makes me really nervous because this is like story as old as time, where Jews will go and this is, it's a nomad thing. I mean, we're in here, it's not even a Jewish community. We're in a nomad expat hub in Bali. And like Bali used to be just not what it was now. And you can say for better or for worse. You know, Bali was very different than it is now, like 10 years ago or 20 years ago. We were talking to people about it, like Bali, because of the people that moved to Bali, is a very different place. A lot of people moved here, especially now. There's a lot of Russians moving here. There's a lot of people from northern countries that want to live in a warm place, and they're building here. They're building real estate here. The taxes are not favorable here. It's like 35% taxes for corporate taxes, but then plus you also have to pay all kinds of taxes and fees along the way. You're constantly expected to bribe officials to not give you tickets. Like, they really milk the foreigners. It's not a favorable situation for like we were eating yesterday, and we went out to eat, and it was 15% tax for eating, and on top of that, you're also just paid like at least 4 or 5 times what locals pay. More than that, you can be like literally, and you can be standing right next to a local, and they tell the local, give me 10,000 rupees, and they tell you, give me 40,000 rupees. And this is just the way of life when you're a foreigner, nomad, expat, whatever you want to call it. And but because you're kind of trained like this, you're kind of trained to always be saving for a rainy day. You're always moving, always gonna get always preparing to get the shorter end of the stick. So because you're always doing this, the expats are still succeeding and better off, because it's not just, I mean, not just here, it's everywhere. We've been traveling a lot for the past few years. We've been just living in different places. We've been slow traveling. So by slow traveling, I mean we've been actually nesting, buying furniture, sometimes living in a place for a long term. We spent almost a year in Colombia. We spent about 6 months in Mexico. And in between, we were just like living in different places: Argentina, Ecuador, Costa Rica, whatever, and Uruguay. So we've been just like either living or traveling through different places in South America and Central America. And it's just the way of life. What I'm learning is that when you stay in one place for so long, you just get weaker, because you're losing the muscles that you need to be succeeding and surviving, and you're basically you're losing. And it's like this every place that we go to in the world, and we see this here in Bali, is like people think that it's only in this place where they're getting weaker. And we thought this back in the States, that it's only in the States that people are getting weaker, they're getting poor, or whatever. Our friends from the UK felt like it was only in the UK. Like, wherever you are in the world, it's gonna feel like, oh, like this place is just getting worse and worse and worse. And it's all because of the foreigners. The foreigners are coming here, they're driving up the prices, they're bringing in their bad habits. But the thing is, like, most of the bad things actually are coming from the it's just natural for people that are struggling to blame their environment, because it's not that the other people are making you have problems. It's that other people that have been trained to save for a rainy day, to always be on the run, to move with the wind, So those people that have been living kind of on the edge of their seat for longer than you have are a little better equipped, so they're able to compete with you in this environment a little better. So they're basically raising the bar for you. So what they're doing, and I guess that is inflation in a way, and they are causing inflation. But most people, instead of acknowledging that, instead of it, and I don't even want to make an opinion about this, because like what is correct is just whatever people want. But generally in a place where people have been kind of trained to be, I don't want to use the word stagnant because that has a negative connotation, but like trained to be in one place for a long time, their receptors in their brain that can work with a changing environment have become weaker and weaker and weaker, and they're generally not going to be able to compete with a foreign, just like the same way that your body, if you haven't been exposed to a lot of bacterias when you were growing up, and your body hasn't learned to, like, you haven't traveled a lot when you were little, you haven't been exposed to like a lot of, your parents were maybe very sterile, and so just like when you're like that, you're going to be a little weaker whenever you get a virus. It's going to hit you a little harder. It's going to hurt you more. You might even survive it a little bit less. You might need antibiotics. So it's the same exact thing. People that have stayed in one place for too long, that are only speaking one language, that are only exposed to one paradigm, they're just naturally going to be weaker than whatever the foreigner is in the place that they are. Because the foreigner, especially if they have been in survival mode for longer than you have, they're going to be, they're just going to be better trained to deal with the stuff so they might actually be dealing with worse than you. They might be actually discriminated more than you are. They might be actually getting the shorter end of the stick. They might be actually having to pay bigger prices than you're paying. They might be, they might have it worse than you, but they're able to handle it better than you because they've just been in this situation for longer, where they have been forced to kind of adapt. And maybe they've been, and in the case with a lot of Jews, or at least the stereotype of the Jews, is that they have been evolutionarily doing this for thousands and thousands of years. And if you look at Jewish history, the Jews that survive are a very tiny minority. So yes, there's going to be Jews that are not like this. They're not super adaptable. They do stay in one place and they stagnate, and they become cemented in whatever the situation of that local place is, and then they become weaker, and then when the next genocide of the Jews happens, those people get wiped out. But only, if you look at Jewish history, only a tiny fraction usually survive genocide. People think that Jews are like a superior, or people talk about this on, I don't know, like people think, everyone thinks something different. People that don't understand the way Judaism works, a lot of people will say that I've heard the weirdest things in the States. Like, people will say that Jews are like not humans, they're like extraterrestrial. They have one of my friends, because he's like half Jewish, half Catholic. He was in school, his friends asked if they could see his horns because his parents told him that that Jews have horns. Like people think that it's so, especially when you have been stuck in your bubble for so long, and then you see another person and they're so different than you, it's very easy to assume that they are not human because you've just not met humans that are like that. But the reality is that the Jewish community, it's just selected for the strongest people. It's a Darwinism. It's natural selection. It's selected for the people that have been basically living through only the people that have been able to handle the genocides, or whatever you want to call it. And that makes me really nervous to be part of the Jewish community, because it just, the adaptability that we have, the legendary adaptability of the Jews, to me, is just not there. The Jews of today, the way it is, it's just not. The expat nomads are doing better, in my opinion, at being under the radar, nomad capitalist, which is really interesting, by the way. So nomad capitalist is another one of those people where I always thought he was Jewish because he's so survival oriented. And if you guys follow nomad capitalist, he's basically like a strategist, and he's a YouTuber. You can look him up here. So nomad capitalist is a YouTuber strategist, and his whole thing is basically how to survive and protect your assets from greedy people, from greedy citizens, from greedy government citizens, other entities that basically feel entitled to you, your work, your lot, who you are, just because you have been exposed to them. So his whole thing is all about diversifying, and he talks about his three, what did he call it? The three-pronged system, where diversifying your assets and where you live and where you bank in at least 3 different places. So you never work and live in the same place as your business is headquartered. Your business is headquartered never in the same place as where your bank accounts are. Even the places where you live, you diversify it. You live 1/3 of the year in, I think it's called his trifecta. You live 1/3 of the year in this country, that country, that country. It's basically a way of surviving by never fully being a traveler, but never fully being a citizen. You're always kind of in the middle, and you're always learning how to adapt to a host place, but then also diversify and be basically adapting to multiple environments at once. Financially, never be playing only in one market, never be playing only in the East or only in the West. Playing in both, playing in multiple markets, playing also beyond East-West paradigms. For me, I would take it even a step further, and I would say, people think that it's not important to learn another language. I think it's really important to learn another language, even if you will never use it. It's really important to be exposed in your mind mentally to another paradigm. When you speak another language, especially if it's like a nobody language, or if it's a random language that nobody's ever heard of, that is just so different from your paradigm, the people that speak that language are living in a different planet than you. That increases your mental elasticity, your ability to adapt. You're less likely to be depressed. And I know that you're like, why? Okay, you're less likely to be depressed because you get depressed, emotionally exhausted, mentally exhausted from thinking about the problems that you're thinking in your personal life. You're exhausted. Your brain cells are kind of ruminating over things. They're kind of your brain is tired, or cortisol levels are high. You're just mentally exhausted. Your body is exhausted. It's going to latch on to thoughts and ruminations that are regurgitating within the paradigm that you're in. When you speak another language, naturally over time, especially if you speak it really well, you become exposed to another paradigm, another set of problems, another way of thinking, and it kind of pulls you out from your natural regurgitating ways, if that makes sense. So it's just another thing that snaps you out of it. So maybe languages, maybe having multiple hobbies, having different things, diversifying yourself. It's just more and more things to strengthen your mind, to bring more connections within your brain, to be firing neurotransmitters that are more active, that you don't get stuck within one frame of mind. I'm very distracted by that. sound. So within the Jewish community as well, let me just close this real quick. It's the best I can do. It's my bathing suit towel, forever. So within the Jewish community as well, it's really important, but I don't think that the Jewish community at large is really prepared for this at all, but like, it's just really important to diversify where you are. And I think that people are so in a bubble. Whenever I talk to anyone from the community, and I have some friends that have diversified, that are kind of marrying out, girls that marry out, that are kind of like living their own life, that are maybe they didn't marry out, but maybe they're kind of more separate, more away from the Jewish hubs. Especially right now, there's a lot of people in the world with unregulated nervous systems, and they have complaints that are very valid and that I would never knock on, because as someone who struggled with an unregulated nervous system my whole life, I know how it feels. I know how it feels when you are getting squashed and feeling squashed by everybody around you kind of beating you out, essentially, for whatever reason it is. Maybe they were privileged, maybe they were just more adaptable, maybe they were just foreigners and they were more interesting. A lot of places in the world are having fired up, unregulated nervous systems, and a lot of them are spreading that to each other because of the internet travel. And what I would do if I was part of a Jewish community is I would, first of all, try to strengthen my ability to pick up and move. Try to be a little bit more nomadic, and understand that this is good for you. This is good for your kids. This is good for your family, for everybody to learn how to be a little bit more nomadic, a little more diversified. If you're financially doing well, try to diversify your assets among different places. And already a lot of people are good at this, especially in the Persian Jewish community. They're already really good at this. People are generally not keeping all their assets and stuff in one country, in one place. But most Jews that I've noticed are not really good at this. So I would say learn from nomad. Oh, and I was talking about nomad capitalists. So I always thought, like, wow, this guy sounds very Jewish, and he talks about how people think he's Jewish, but he's not. But then in a more recent video, he talked about how he was trying to get his citizenship in Lithuania because his great-great-grandfather was Jewish. And when they went to look at the records, they weren't able to give him his citizenship. And he was like, but my great-grandfather is Jewish. He's Lithuanian Jewish. Lithuanian, not Jewish. My great-grandfather is Lithuanian. Why can't I get my Lithuanian citizenship? It says here that I can get my Lithuanian citizenship if my great-grandfather is Lithuanian. And they discovered that his great-grandfather is Lithuanian, but he's Lithuanian Jewish. So that's why they couldn't give him his citizenship, because the Lithuanian Jews at the time, they weren't allowed to get the normal citizenship. So that's when I discovered, he has that Jewish heritage. And it is really a thing. It is really something that affects people. And like a lot of people that are like hyper survival oriented have that in their bloodline. And it's really fascinating. Like it's just very interesting to see. There are a few YouTubers that are like this. One of them is Seleh Moore, that if I had to guess, Seleh Moore has Jewish heritage as well. That it's a very specific type of survival acting. But actually a lot of Jews don't have this. A lot of Jews feel very cemented in their one place and their one paradigm, and they're just like, if other people hate us, they're screw them, whatever. But like, the fact is that that's just not the way Judaism works. Judaism doesn't, it makes me nervous. To me, it makes me nervous because that's just not how my ancestors survived for so many years. To just be loud and proud, that's not, for a lot of Jews in the world, they would rather lay low because that is their heritage. That's how their ancestors survived for many years. Ancestors did not survive for many years by having a big, huge Star of David on a synagogue and going outside with the whole Jewish attire, showing the world this, and just expecting people to just not mess with them. That's not how Jews survived for many years. Jews survived for many years by learning tactics of how to diversify, how to lay low, how to not be, and another thing that I would say is try to spend time in countries where people don't know about Jews, where it's not a big deal. I was talking to my mom, my sister-in-law last night, and I was showing them the door of our place has like swastikas engraved all over the door. And here in Bali, because of the Hindu religion, swastikas are a symbol of peace. It's not a symbol of, it has nothing to do with like Nazi Germany. In fact, the Nazis stole the swastika. Swastika means like peace and prosperity. They stole it from the Hindu religion. And many people know this, but many people don't. So I was showing my sister-in-law and my mom the swastikas on the door, and they were like, whoa, they were like, do they hate Jews there? And I said, no. Swastika is a good thing. It came from a piece of it came from a symbol of peace, prosperity, love for other humans. It's some of the most loving people that I have ever met are here in Bali, and this is their religion, their Hindu religion. But if you didn't know that, if you only lived in places where Jews are a big, huge, have a huge spotlight, you're gonna be more exposed to the anti-Semitic versions of it. And you're going to walk around, and the thing is, the law of attraction says that, and it's just look at it in your personal life. When you're walking around thinking and telling to yourself, everybody hates Jews, everybody hates Jews, everybody hates Jews. You're walking around and you're just repeating this to yourself, everybody hates Jews, everybody hates Jews. You're gonna attract people that hate Jews. You're not gonna attract the people that like Jews or that are normal or that don't care about Jews. You're going to attract, your nervous system, your brain signals, it's all electricity, right? It's going to attract and it's going to match with the brain waves and electrical signals of a person that is on that level as you, that hates Jews, that is thinking everybody hates Jews, everybody hates Jews, everybody hates Jews. So a lot of Jews are basically walking magnets for anti-Semitism, walking around with this idea, and we were like trained in school, everybody hates Jews, everybody hates Jews, everybody wants to kill you, everybody wants to kill you, everybody wants to kill you, everybody. So they're trained to repeat these mantras, these terrible mantras in their head over and over and over and over again. And they're doing this in places where the host population is already struggling, has very highly activated nervous systems, and is hyper aware of Jews. And you know what else? Not only are people hyper aware of Jews, they will never come out and say it in public because this has been brewing for a long, long, long time underground, because they have been persecuted for saying this out loud because of the fear that they will be branded as terrorists. So actually, they might actually become terrorists because they're doing this underground, and this has been allowed to foster. Anytime people are censored for a long time, whether it's Jews or whether it's people that hate Jews, censored for a long time, not able to be their full self, and they're basically having these obstacles, having to grow and expand within a certain set of limitations, they're going to have a much stronger muscle than other people to be able to thrive in that kind of environment. I don't know if I'm making sense, but I think a lot of Jews are highly oblivious to the fact that like, yes, everybody might hate Jews, but also you're kind of exacerbating this thing, and it's happening in a way that you can't really see because you have been in your community, you've been only interacting with people in your community, and you can't know how it's brewing outside of your world, and you can't be prepared for it. You're basically like a group of people that's been, you're not expanding your genetic capabilities by outbreeding. You're not expanding your horizons. You're not diversifying your finances. You are just continuing patterns that make you weaker. And because of your of the successes of other people in your community, which you're relying heavily on those successful people within your community, you're becoming weaker over time. And when that next Shoah happens, you will not see it coming from a mile away. And no ADL or PLC or whatever it's called is going to help. Those people are stupid. The stupidest people I ever heard of. They're probably making whatever problem that you think you're dealing with worse. And so this is getting to be a really long video, but what I would do personally, and this is just what I would do, where I would move if there was another Holocaust, is I would first of all spend, if you really, really believe in anti-Semitism or whatever, this fear, I would basically dedicate myself towards becoming a really strong person and really diversified, learning other languages, living in other places where not a lot of Jews live. And you know what? Another thing that I will say is that is much easier than you might expect, because right now in the Jewish community, people are trained to stick to like the largest hubs possible. New York City, Los Angeles, Miami, Israel, whatever. Like, people are trained to stick to places where they've been brainwashed that kosher is only possible in these places because we have a kosher certification, and it's like a mafia because like they are able to charge so much more than everybody else for you to eat their kosher food or whatever. So they're basically brainwashed into only eating that. And in school you learn that like you just learn so many, they just make kosher so complicated. And the reality is like, you know what, you could still keep kosher in a place where there are no Jews. It's called eating vegan, okay? And it's called learning how to butcher your own animals, which when, you know, the reality is like Iranian Jews, like my ancestors, my brother knows how to butcher animals because this is what they learned how to do in Iran, because this is how they survived without a kosher certification agency. But, and I know I'm sounding a little bit like talking down, but it's like, this is part of becoming so weak over time, becoming industrialized as part of the West. I think the West as a whole is becoming weak too. Is like people are learning they're not able to survive on their own. So the first thing I would do if there was like another Holocaust, or if I think that there's another Holocaust or another Shoah, whatever it's called, genocide, I would first learn how to survive a little better on my own, apart from like these big huge civilizations. For me, the hardest thing for me is like Amazon Prime. I really miss Amazon Prime, but part of me also is really happy that I'm not living with it, because I'm learning how to exist and operate, learning how to go to the grocery store to get a marker board, and like learning how to try to exist beyond Amazon Prime. beyond the things that I relied on in a bigger, more industrialized economy. If you're Jewish, religious, Orthodox, that would be the first thing I would focus on. Learn how to be how you are, to keep to your faith in a place where that is not so convenient to do that. In a place where you might not wear your loud and proud garb outside. Make yourself a little stronger, more prepared. Learn how to keep Shabbat in a place that does not have an Eruv, that does not have like a big huge synagogue, that does not have a lot of Jews. Here in Bali, it's so easy because there's a ton of strictly vegan places that are strictly vegan to the point where, because of a lot of people don't eat meat here, it's strictly vegan to the point where they have separate kitchens between the vegan and the meat stuff. But when I tell my family and friends that keep kosher about it, a lot of them are like, no way, we would never eat at a restaurant or a place where the food is not prepared by someone who adheres to like strict kosher or whatever, and that isn't kosher certified. So they want kosher certification, which is really something that you can only get, which is first of all a Western thing, because they used to not be like this. In Iran they didn't, or at least in the past, before this communication of East-West, they didn't rely on kosher certification. But now they are brainwashed that they think that they need to rely on that. So, or maybe they just be, it's just, I feel like people are gonna be so mad. I don't care, whatever. But I never ended up even using this. I want to use my marker board. So here, I'm gonna make a smiley face with my marker board. So yeah, that would be my first step. My first step would be to try to learn how to be my faith and myself outside of that, the limitations of that bubble. Maybe go with like a small crew of people. Organize a small crew of friends, maybe a minyan, 10 families or whatever, and move to a place where nobody's ever heard of Jews. And I know a lot of Jews actually do this. And but that's what I would do. If you really strongly want to adhere to your faith and you want to do this, I would first start with doing it in a place, learning your muscles, strengthening your Jewish muscles. So it's your Jewish muscle. Strengthen it, like you're going to the gym. Go live in a Muslim country where Judaism is not publicly accepted. So people don't even know what it looks like to be Jewish. So you're not even on anybody's radar. That's what I would do. And I would just diversify. I would, learn about nomad capitalist, learn more languages. And again, a lot of Jews already do this, and that's why they're successful. But a lot of Jews don't. A lot of Jews right now are kind of living in to me, a ticking time bomb. Because the US is one of the most culturally insulated places in the world. Americans are very culturally insulated. Already Americans are kind of in a bubble where they are not, I was like this too, like it's really hard to perceive life outside of the States when you're living in it. It's hard to perceive growing, like anywhere else in the world you go, everybody speaks at least 2 or more languages because they've had to, but Americans are not. So they're far less adaptable, they are far less able to create more with less, meaning anywhere else in the world, you can pay somebody, for example, to do something for you. They'll do an amazing job, they'll know how to navigate, and they'll be able to do it on a very small budget because they're able to live an awesome life on a smaller budget. Americans, because of the comfort of the previous generations, perhaps, Americans are very unable to do that. They need more money, and output is much, much less, and it's going to be less quality, and the paradigm, the perception of the world is so insulated and in a bubble that they won't even know it until, and there's to them no reason to keep growing, expanding, diversifying, and when it happens, they won't even know why. It's going to look, when they lose everything, it's going to be a surprise, it's going to be divine intervention, it's going to be ambiguous because they don't have the receptors for it. So it's just going to look like aliens came from Mars and took all their shit. They're going to be very unprepared. Yeah. And I say this as someone who grew up in the States. The enemy is not typically people that are acting maliciously, that are the Chinese government coming and trying to drive up the prices in your neighborhood. The enemy is usually just other people who have been in survival mode or are just looking for a home, and they just happened, and then they came to live in your neighborhood, and then the real estate agent thought that they could get more money out of them, let's say, the homeowner, because that's their job, because their job is to make money from their house that they're selling, like, because you're a crazy, stupid person if you don't. So the seller charged as high as they could, and the foreigner was like, okay, yeah, we'll pay this, and they bought the house, and then the local prices in that area that you're living in, maybe in the government's record, went up, and then your taxes went up, and now you're like, oh my god, these people are my enemies now because they're basically trying to make my life harder. But nobody is trying to make your life hard. The malicious, nefarious actors don't care about you. That's the reality. But it's okay, you don't have to believe me when I say this, because you have to believe that there's nefarious, malicious actors right now because you have an unregulated nervous system and you need to latch onto something to take some of the pressure off of you. So I really support that, and I think that I would do the same. But if we're going to talk about reality here, the reality is that there is no nefarious actors. The nefarious actors are just people that have been have been having to use those muscles for longer, for maybe over the course of more generations than you have, and are thus a little better equipped now to deal with it. We see a lot of Westerners that come here that are really broke in their home country. They're really broke, they don't have money, they're struggling, they don't have a family. A lot of people don't have a family. They come to Bali with zero support, all over the place, chaotic nervous systems, and because they've been living like this for so long, they've been kind of operating, they're still somehow able to cough up more money to pay for things than the local people, because the local people, let's say, have had their support system for many years, and so if you were to take the local people and say, okay, now you have to do something, compete with this foreigner that costs $100,000, and the foreigner somehow coughs it up and the local person can't cough it up. I don't even know if I'm giving this as a good example, but my point is with this is like, people are competing with you not because they want to, but because they've had to. They've had to live in this lifestyle where they pay. If it was up to me, I would be paying nothing to live and survive. I would just pay $10 for the whole year for me to be living like a king, okay? But the reality is, because I'm used to paying a certain amount, I've shaped my whole lifestyle in a way to pay that I'm going to expect to pay this amount. So let's say me and a local is standing in line to buy something. If the local was going to be upset to pay the same much as me, I wouldn't be upset. Not because but because I've been trained over years to pay more than that, because I live in an economy, because I came from an economy where people pay more for things. People pay more for things. People ask more for things. You ask more to be paid more, to pay more. Like, it's never coming from me trying to hurt anybody else. It's just, I've been trained that I have to pay more for this and that. I've been trained that there's always going to be a tax on something. Actually, the locals have a lot of taxes and stuff they have to deal with. I mean, I'm not commenting on the people in Bali, but like, it's like this everywhere in the world. So this video is getting to be a little long, and I'm gonna go now. But that is what I would do if I thought that there was going to be another Holocaust, is that I would try to survive beyond the matrix of the paradigm that the very commercialized Jewish community teaches. I would try to spend time outside of that. Not so that you can be a traitor to the Jewish community, not so that you can be anti-Semitic, not so that you can betray your ancestors or whatever. If you think that I'm betraying my ancestors, you don't have to do what I do. But just so that you, as a person, can be stronger and be more adaptable. Yeah. Like, and there's like so many studies that show that people that have had like continuous stress over the years but have learned how to calm themselves down from that stress, they have more, their brain is like is more elastic. And I don't know how they're able to tell this. They're able to tell this from like a scan, that the brain is able to be more elastic because it's forced to learn and overcome certain things. And so if a big, huge life tragedy or crisis were to hit the person with a more elastic brain, they're going to be able to handle it better than the person who wasn't able to be as elastic. And me saying this is hopefully not an assault to anybody or to insult anybody, although I have said this with anger a lot in the past because I felt kind of unheard or misunderstood, but just sharing my love here and my smiley face. Okay, hope everybody has a great day. Goodbye.